Welcome back to Heightscast, the podcast of the Heights School. This is Rich Moss with you from the campus of the Heights in Potomac, Maryland. We're here to talk about the education and the formation of young men fully alive in the liberal arts tradition. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for continuing to share us, our mission, and our vision of education with your friends. We're very grateful. Today we share a talk on Mortimer Adler's modes of teaching from Heights upper school teacher, Mr. Austin Hatch. The talk was delivered at the Forum Teaching Conference this past November. Austin's been at the Heights since 2004. He briefly moved to Houston, Texas to help begin Western Academy before returning to the Heights in 2012. Austin graduated from the Catholic University of America and then received his master's in the liberal arts at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. At the Heights, he teaches upper school core, which is a double period of both literature and history. He's also the director of our Jackson Scholars Senior Thesis Program and one of the founding members of the world famous Hout class, History of Western Thought, and a current teacher in that program. Austin is most importantly husband and the father of 7 children, 2 of whom are already Heights graduates. For his talk at the conference, Mr. Hatch takes as a starting point Adler's 3 modes of teaching: didactic instruction, supervised practice, and active participation. And he speaks to what each of those looks like in a liberal arts classroom. The live program included, as you'll hear, a practical exercise in the middle of the talk where the conference attendees heeded that advice to actively participate. And it was a ton of fun to witness, but we've excised that middle to include only the lecture for this episode. If you'd like to be a part of that, if you want to step into active participation in Mr. Hatch's classroom, do consider joining us for our Teaching Essentials workshop this summer, where the same Austin Hatch and his good friend and colleague Tom Steenson will lead a personalized week of talks and seminars on the teaching craft. We would absolutely love to see you there. Please enjoy this talk from Mr. Austin Hatch. And before we get to the presentation, just note that we have coming up in April the 12th, a conference for Heights parents and their friends beyond the walls titled Tell the Next Generation, on passing the faith to our sons. So it should be a great day. Do visit heightsforum.org to register. On top of that, check out our Headmaster's Substack. A lot of cool new things going on there. Definitely, especially if you're a teacher, listen to the new Heights Forum faculty podcast. There was just a great episode on textbooks. So it's great to hear 4 amazing teachers talk shop about their perspectives on textbooks. And then as I just commented, really excited to offer this summer Austin and Tom's program for teachers. So this is going to be a 1-week seminar here at the Heights, Teaching Essentials, June 16th through the 20th. So to learn more or to register, this is for teaching men. Do join us on campus with these 2 really, really great teachers. Visit heightsforum.org to register, to give you a taste of what will be included in this upcoming workshop. Enjoy this presentation by Mr. Austin Hatch. Thanks for listening.
All right, so the modes of teaching I'm going to talk about are 3. Didactic instruction. I'm stealing from Mortimer Adler, by the way, if you're wondering where the modes of teaching come from. Didactic instruction. 2, coaching, supervised practice. And 3, the 3rd mode, enlarging understanding by means of active participation. So each could be a talk unto itself. Each could be a workshop for a weekend or a week. But I'm just going to try to give you some practical notes on each and then make a case for the latter 2. That's the map. So what's the context of these modes of teaching and what's the aim, right? So I would argue, or wiser people than I have said, friendship is the origin and the end of your teaching. So friendship is the origin of your teaching. Maybe it's not an intimate friendship, but the parents who have chosen this school and the administrators who have chosen you for this room, right, have placed you in this, and this conspiracy with those parents, right, that's the origin of your teaching. And the end of your teaching is friendship with your students, which isn't going to happen for some decades, right? So you're not going to be their friend at the end of the first quarter or at the end of the year. But I've got several colleagues now who were once my students, And I even have, like, the Heights has the tagline, we're raising sons that you would like your daughter to marry, or, helping form sons. But I believe that I am the first faculty member whose daughter has married an alumnus of the Heights, right? He married my daughter, and he was once a student in my class. He was a very good student. So yeah, we're growing in friendship, but friendship seeks equality, right? So that's why it's kind of a becoming friendship with the students, and we'll really be peers. I like Field of Dreams. I don't know if you're too young to know the movie Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner builds a baseball field in his cornfield, right? And there's kind of an image of heaven where he's playing catch with his dad, but his dad is dead, right? But they're both men in their prime playing catch. And I think they really captured something there of heaven, right? Because by the time I was a man, my dad was older, and like, we weren't peers. And when he was a man, I was a boy, and we weren't peers. And so that friendship kind of awaits us. So the friendship with your students is becoming. But that's the end that we seek. But it starts with the parents. Okay. So friendships aiming at that equality. I had a mentor meeting with a freshman some years ago. Now he's in college. And I was talking to him. And you learn a lot in mentoring about parenting, because the young man, like, talks to you about his parents. And then after the meeting, you write it down like, oh, I'm going to be a better parent now because I just heard that thing that the kid told me that his dad does. So this is where I got this idea. But the father said, look, son, we're not friends, but we will be. We're becoming friends, right? So as you grow, then we can become friends. Some of the notes on friendship, my freshmen really take to Cicero's De Amicitia, right? And one of the things he observes, and it's not true because he said it, but it is true, and he did say it, right? That nothing is so attractive to human nature as virtue. And this is why friendship just kind of leaps out when we behold something excellent, right? Someone with an excellent virtue, some beautiful performance, some great catch. Like, you're just walking down the street, and the TV in the sports restaurant is, you don't even know who's playing. You just know that he got his feet in, right? And and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful to behold. You're captivated for that moment, or that song, or whatever. Nothing is so attractive as virtue. So what we want to do with our modes of teaching, I think, is to prepare the time and the space where they can practice being human well, right? So the virtues that go along with being human. And then also for them to be able to have time to behold those virtues in practice in you, in the history book, in the literature book, in the author's work, in God's creation, but also in each other, right? So that's what we're working on. That origin, that we're not there because we're not seeking friendships to help us get something done, right? The origin of it is not that they need us to get the grade, or I need them to behave so I can get the lesson done, or I need them to, but we're together, and so good things are going to happen because we're together, trying to do human things. Okay, so with that background of friendship in mind, let's talk modes. So didactic instruction. I struggle with laziness and procrastination, so either I've gotten worse at didactic instruction as my laziness and whatever the other one I just said was, has increased, or I've become less attracted to the need to give didactic instruction. And maybe it's a mixture of both, I don't know. But didactic instruction, you're going to need it in your class, obviously, and I'm standing here in front of you, and you're taking notes, and you're listening, and this is didactic instruction. And if I, put the 6 common feet of English meter on the board, and we talked about spondees and pyrrhics, and iams and anapests. Okay, that would be didactic instruction. Or we go over the rules for adding fractions and why you need common denominators and multiplying fractions. Okay, didactic. So you're gonna do that, and you want to do that well. I would say seek to be brief, seek to be clear, and repeat. That's it, right? Be brief, be clear, and repeat. Whatever it is that you're handing on to them. Kind of have an unhealthy attachment to basketball, and I love to go to coaches' conferences. And one of those years ago, a gentleman talking about brevity, clarity, repetition, right? Repetition is a great teacher. And, let me say it again. Repetition is a great teacher. And his point was, don't be so hard to play for, right, as a coach. Don't be mean, right? Don't make it, set them up for success. So that was one of my goals this year, talking with Mike Moynihan at the beginning of the year. I want my quizzes to be easier. So on Monday, I'm just going to tell them what I'm going to ask them on Wednesday. And I'm going to make it shorter and clearer, and some of that just comes with time, right? So you prepare your didactic instruction by your own study, and that's when you can be brief, when you really know the thing, and that's when you can be clear, when you really know the thing, and when you've repeated trying to explain it to them. So be patient with yourself, because maybe it's the first time you've taught it, and you don't know it well enough to be brief and clear. You'll get better. You can apologize to them later. Right? You'll have another group 3 years from now. They'll get a better teacher just because you've practiced. That's fine. So prepare your didactic instruction by your study. Seek to be brief and clear, and then repeat. But I want to focus on the second two modes. So the second mode, developing skills by means of coaching supervised practice. Developing skills in the students by means of coaching supervised practice. As Aristotle, paraphrasing, those things we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. 3 things I want to suggest for coaching supervised practice, right? 1, grow in attention to detail. 2, grow in patience. And 3, allow yourself time to coach. Okay, so what do I mean by grow in attention to detail? The details of the student and the details of the skill, right? I've got to pay attention to the way Johnny writes his introductory paragraphs, whether he indents that first line, whether he mentions the author and the title that he's writing about, or whether he just kind of spits the answer out as if he was in a conversation with somebody who just asked him that, right? If I can watch him writing, then I know how to help him much more quickly, right? So I want to build into my mode of teaching some time where I can supervise them at practice. Now this helps your friendship with the parents, because if you're allowing them to work in class, maybe you're finishing math class by allowing them to begin their homework, and maybe there's enough time for them to finish their homework, and you only call it homework so that they want to get it done in class, because then it's a little bit of a gamesmanship, the tricksy rabbit that Father Hardy was singing about yesterday. Then you can see whether they're showing their work, whether they're lining up. They got this multi-digit addition problem. Are they lining things up or not? And maybe they're getting things wrong because they're just not neat, right? So this is just a skill of neatness. This isn't really about whether they understand arithmetic. So, but you need time to be able to see that, right? So you create those. So in the high school, I'll have a Friday that's just, this is an in-class essay. And so the room is silent, and they can use their books, and they can use their notebooks, and they're just writing in the prompt, to answer the prompt. And sometimes you could discuss this as a way of guarding against plagiarism. It's a kind of defense, because you got to write it. It's got to be handwritten, and it's got to be in my presence. You're doing this work. But it's also offense in the sense that I get to see them and where I can help them, right? And they're allowed to ask me questions. And you just kind of float around like a bee to the different flowers. or like a gadfly to the guy who's trying to read his logic text instead of write the essay, because that quiz is coming next period. You can do that too. So you're attending to the details of the student and the details of the skill. That's what I mean by growing attention to detail. And then growing patience. So, okay, great, you've identified that he's not neat, and you're coaching with him on this. Guess what? He's not going to be neat after you tell him, hey, you should work on being neat. Because until it's a habit, right, it's the other habit, right? So how do I grow in patience? I think you should try to practice a skill, right? Try to practice something that you're not good at. Maybe it's reciting poetry. Maybe it's playing the guitar. Maybe you're good at that, so you should try something else, because the thing you're good at is easy. The thing that you're not good at is difficult. So if you're going to be patient with him because he's not good at the thing yet, well, then encounter that struggle, right? And you get that. If you're trying to live a spiritual life, you take up spiritual reading, maybe you have a regular spiritual director. You know there's that thing that you're back in the confessional still struggling with. And so since you can see that in yourself, you can be patient with him. And then that helps you to be more cheerful as you encourage him. You're going to make progress. It's okay. I know we're struggling with the same thing. Just renew, begin again, right? So growing attention to detail, growing attention, the detail of the student, the detail of the skill, and then growing patience. And then allow time to coach. So if didactic instruction, if you're thinking about your course as entirely full of didactic instruction, you have, just this, you've got all this knowledge and you want to give it to them. If that takes up every minute of every day, then you can't supervise them in practice, so you can't give them this mode. So I like to just kind of block things out, right? I've worked at a couple of schools that wanted, as a scheduler, right? How do we get how do we get more students going to Mass, right? Lots of Catholic schools, you got the Mass at 6:30 a.m., right? And so if your parents are superhumanly virtuous or you're superhumanly virtuous and you walk the 7 miles, you get to go to Mass every day, and then school starts, right? But here, Mass is at I don't even know what time it is, 10:25. It's right in the middle of the day. It's so easy to go to Mass. As a faculty member, I came here, I was like, this is amazing. But if you talk to an administrator where the minutes are already allotted, how can we get Mass in the day? It's really hard, right? So put the big important thing in first and then figure everything else out. Then it's easy. So similarly with time to coach, maybe it's Friday, right? If you're a literature teacher, and that every other Friday is just, that's when we're going to write essays, or we're going to write, maybe it's just paragraphs in response to the text, or maybe we're working on writing a sonnet or a story, whatever. But let them do it in class. You then become a friend to the family because you're not sending all this homework home when they could be doing chores or eating dinner with the family, and instead they're living this monastic academic existence where they're not allowed to do that. You can't be friends with your siblings, you can't do chores, you can't eat because there's so much homework to do. That's not good. You're not helping them to grow as a man, which is what you're trying to do, or a young woman, what you're trying to do. So I have taught in 2 different settings that are co-ed settings. So I'm using boys as the example because I'm here at the Heights, but obviously you could teach it more than one setting. So allow time to coach. Maybe you just put in the big blocks. I like to take the planner at the beginning of the year, think about the whole year. What are the major works that we're doing in literature? What are the major primary sources that we're doing in history? Kind of map it out. But then I also like to look at the week and say, okay, Friday, that's going to be the day that we test, and tests are going to be, we're going to do a recitation one Friday. The next Friday, we're going to do a seminar. The third Friday, we're going to do an essay, and then we're going to repeat, right? And we'll interrupt that flow in January because it's going to be student presentations, or it's going to be the Canterbury Tales lunch contest, right? Everybody's going to write 100 lines of iambic pentameter. Everybody's going to put in $1. Winner gets $18, which buys you lunch. So all of a sudden, everybody wants to be a poet, right? Because there's money on the line. But you just kind of say, what are the things that they need, and then let me put those things in. And if I want to see them recite something from memory, and coach them on their posture as they do so, because that's a skill you need just as a man, right? You're going to give a eulogy, you're going to give a toast at your brother's wedding, you're going to, whatever. We're just talking about ordinary things. Maybe your profession requires it, maybe it doesn't. Well, let me give them a chance to practice that, that fits their age. And then I can coach them on that, because so you have this habit, you know, like you don't do it when we're just talking, but you just, when you recite poetry, you just kind of sway back and forth. Yeah, maybe don't do that, right? Unless you think the character's doing that. So just, but you got to give yourself that time with your planner, and a rhythm there. Okay, third mode, and I'll try to leave time for questions so you can be like, what are you talking about? But the third mode, enlarging understanding by means of Socratic questioning and active participation. Enlarging understanding by means of Socratic questioning and active participation. So there's lots of different ways to approach this, and maybe some of them apply to one class that you're teaching and less to another class. But I'll make a case for a couple, right? So enlarging one's understanding. So maybe down in the valley, right, Mr. Heil has taught the guys about different kinds of trees and different birds, and they've looked at the guides, and, you know, they've done some diagrams and whatever. When I was teaching natural history, we learned a lot of poetry about birds and trees, because I didn't know anything about birds and trees, but I knew poetry. So, you know, Tom Steenson still gives me a hard time about that. Oh, it's natural grammar. Look at that. Yeah. But the contemplative walk, right? My third grader comes home and he tells me, oh, we went on a contemplative walk today. Oh, what's a contemplative walk? Well, you just walk in silence in the valley and you look at stuff. That's beautiful. And then I was talking to him yesterday, and I couldn't remember the name of this exercise, right? I was like, what did he call it? You know, Nate, when Mr. Heil took you on, and that it was a contemplative walk, right? Oh yeah, it's called a contemplative walk, right? So this is just his ordinary experience for this third grader, this sense of contemplation. And there's certain prep for that, right? Okay, this is different than a hike, right? On a hike, we might be raucous and singing and things like that, but this, and then you gauge how much time, right? Maybe this is a 7-minute contemplative walk, because that's about how long you think, or maybe you think they can do 6 minutes of silence, but you're gonna stretch them or something. I don't know. He's magical, Mr. Heil. But that would be an example of enlarging understanding by means of active participation. But there's this practice of beholding. And one thing that may attend upon these things is that grades kind of have to drop away for these things, because they kind of spoil the thing and make it into an exchange, right? Which maybe you can't escape in some respects, but you try to escape the grade game as much as you can, because they want to do meaningful work. They don't want to play a game with you where I do this, you give me those points, I get the points, I get the grade, etc. Right? So, but that's another talk. So another example besides the contemplative walk might be the seminar. And so I'm a big fan of seminar. I went to St. John's College in Annapolis, so everything is seminar there, right? Science classes are seminar, literature, history, politics, everything's seminar. And by that they mean kind of a democratic discussion. Everybody's around the table, right? So that physically there's a sense that we're all equal. We can all see each other's face. Nobody's in the second row. And we've prepared a text. Maybe it's Newton, maybe it's Descartes, maybe it's Hopkins, what have you. And then we're going to discuss this text, right? So we're listening, right? We've got a shared experience of this reading. We're improvising. So now it's public speaking, but I couldn't really prepare because I didn't know what that other guy was going to say. I had no idea that anybody could read this text the way he read this text. And now I've got to listen. Maybe he's mistaken, or maybe there's something I didn't see, and there's more here. so that's kind of my first experience in grad school, and I just fell in love with that. So then I started really trying to get good at that, and found it's very teacher friendly in a few different ways. One is you don't have to talk that much, right? Now, different temperaments, you may be like, but I really like to talk, right? And I know a lot of things. And maybe, you like to listen, and this is easier for you. But they need to be able to articulate things. And then I like to see in seminar where I've been trying to show them something, maybe for 3 days, and then in a seminar, one of their peers shows it to them. They see it for the first time, right? As if nobody had ever talked about it before, just because of the way he presented it, right? And how great for both of them to have that experience. And I'm just kind of a bystander. So in the seminar, and there's different, I differentiate seminar from kind of classroom conversation. My classroom is a very conversational room, but on most days, I'm doing half the talking. Right, so this guy's got a question, I'm answering the question, or I'm asking, can anybody help this guy with the question? So he's got an answer for the question. I know he's wrong, but I'm going to let it fly so that this guy can say, like, I don't think that's very helpful. Right, but I'm kind of funneling everything in that, playing Socrates, but I'm doing a lot of talking. Whereas in the seminar, I really try to be another one of them. So I don't, you try to build in some freedom, like maybe here's 3 questions. We can do them in whatever order you guys want to. We don't have to deal with all of them, right? So and then who wants to lead it here? And you try to kind of, rather than hand raising, dinner table conversation rules, which maybe doesn't make sense because if you've got a 6-month-old and a 17-year-old, then dinner table conversation has lots of difficulties. But so imagine the peers at the table. So you prepare the time and the space and the text. You let the students know this is different. I tell my students seminar, you can bring food. You just have to bring enough for everybody because we're sharing in the conversation. So sometimes that works out great. We had a guy bring bacon, another guy bring a griddle, and they were making pancakes while we were talking about, right, the Aeneid and whatever. It was fabulous. Others, it falls flat, like nobody brings anything, and you just, what? You people, how? I don't know how civilization will survive. But you let them know this is different, right? Physically it's different. The room has a different setup. The teacher's behavior is different. And then you just try to keep the conversation on the text and singular so they don't fracture into things. And anyway, as I said, these different modes of teaching, they could all get their own talk and they could all get their own workshop. But I do recommend, go ahead, I think it's Chesterton, right? If it's worth doing badly, right? Just experiment, you'll figure it out, right? Talk to some people who know, and it'll get better. But you'll have given them an experience with coaching and with enlarging understanding by means of active participation and beholding, an experience that they wouldn't otherwise have, and that allows them to grow in the virtues that are proper to a human being, right? This listening, this conversation, this attending to detail, being interested in the text, right? Because you got guys who are, they're only taking the class because they have to. They're not really interested in this poem, but this logic teacher says, like, hey, let's look at As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Why are we doing this in logic class? Well, what's the first 8 lines of the poem? It talks about birds and stones and strings, and then they say one thing, and then the last 6 lines of the poem, I, the poet says, say more. And then he starts talking about virtues like justice and Christ. And now I'm doing more didactic instruction, like letting you know what I wanted out of that conversation. But all I did was give them the poem and say, how many parts does this poem have? And why do you divide it into that many parts? And then we just roll. And lots of fun things happen. It's also fun with seminar to ask them a question you don't know the answer to. There was another Hopkins poem. It's called Spring. And I had I was really uncomfortable with this one word, most. Most, O maid's child, thy choice, and worthy the winning, it ends with. And so I just put it in front of my 8th graders, and we just kind of kicked it around. And afterwards, I felt much better about the poem. I was like, yeah, I understand that. That's great. Thanks, guys. So I'll leave that as a teaser. You can go read that poem on your own. Just so I can be clear and briefly repeat, didactic instruction, right? You want to seek brevity, clarity, and repeat, and then coaching by means of supervised practice. Make time for that where you can watch them doing the thing that you need them to do, like speak or write or act or stand and deliver, whatever it is. And then you can give them individual feedback, right? Because you're not just teaching this body of knowledge to the desks, right, but to these young people. And then making time also for these experiences that enlarge understanding and then create moments of contemplation. And I hope, like one of the reasons I do that exercise is that and it's similar to last evening, right, when Rich launches the entertainments, you behold a man. And maybe he's funny, and like I've gotten up to do poems and then failed, and it's kind of like, yeah, he's a man. Like, he gave it a try. That was good. You didn't finish. That's okay, right? And then another time you feel like, I really did that. Or you hear this one sing a song, it's so beautiful, and whether they're really, really outstanding or it's like, no, he kept it in the fairway, and that's a man. But that beholding, they get to see each other, right? Like the nonverbal acting, right? You raised your finger and then you pivoted, and like, yeah, they get to see each other do all these kinds of things or answer questions. The other day in a conversation, one of the seniors who doesn't usually speak up very much, he spoke and every head turned like, what? Who's? And he had this profound insight, and that they could behold him, right? So I think with the coaching and with different experiences that get to this active participation, enlarging one's understanding, Socratic question, all these things, we start to behold each other, right? And then following our Lord, right? The Lord takes delight in his people. And so we should delight in our students and help them to see each other being, human, just practicing these things. So that's what I have to say. And then if you have any questions, I'll do my best to direct them to someone else. Answer them.
So the first question posed to Mr. Hatch was, how do we train our students to prepare well for a seminar-style discussion? And Mr. Hatch is so good, so very good at seminar. He's a king of seminar. So this is a question that I also shared with the questioner. Enjoy the answer.
So different techniques with different texts. So a sonnet is very easy to just drop in front of them. If you have a 40-minute class, read it twice and go. Because everybody's shared in that same partaking, right? Whereas when you want to talk about an entire play, you really do, you want to have lingered on it. So if it's a Shakespeare play, I have taken to trying to read it as quickly as possible, all in class, so that it mimics the 2 or 3 hour show that you might have taken in, and then going back through it, which is confusing to them because we already read it, sir. Like, we know what happens. Yeah, but we want to know what happens. So, like, let's do it again. And they go along with that. But then it's maybe quiz questions where they're allowed to use the text and they're engaging with the text. They're looking for things, but they're not yet sharing them with each other, right? So they're kind of reflecting. There's lots of different techniques. So you can have them write about a thing before they speak, and then they know they have something to lean on because they've already chosen a quote that they thought was key, and then spent some time thinking about what they think that means. So, yeah, I don't know. So those are 2 ways to prep it, I think. But there's lots of others, yeah.
And finally, the second question responded to Mr. Hatch's line that in seminars, and I'll quote here, grades have to drop away for these things because they spoil the thing and make it into an exchange. Escape the grade game as much as you can, end quote. So the questioner asked, how can we persuade a student to do the reading without the utility of a grade?
So my short answer is I trick them. But my longer answer is, yeah, I do. So I do grade seminar, and I do grade, like that would have been a graded performance, that recitation. The grading is very effort friendly, right? If you didn't let me know that you had never done the reading and made no effort, like you're gonna be okay, where there are other things that are very, like if you're writing an essay and I've got a clear rubric, here's 10 things I'm looking for, and I'll give them feedback where it's like, this was done well, this was done but not well, this was not done. They've kind of got the diagnostic reading that they do at the car mechanic shop now. They plug it in the onboard computer, it tells you what it's doing, so like, you got no thesis, brother, so do something about it. Whereas seminar or a recitation is kind of, it's going to be much. So how is that a trick? Well, they like it because they get a good score, in a way. But yeah, we're trying to get away from doing things for grades, and some of that is just, I think. So another one I do is I've taken to reading the freshman letters, moral epistles from Seneca. And I don't give them to them, I just read them to them, and then we just talk about them. And I never quiz them on them. And if it's a writing assignment, I give them whatever they didn't have, But as the relationships in the room start to work, they realize, like, well, he's just going to read us another letter of Seneca, and he's going to say, like, so what do you think about that? Any contrasts, any contradictions, anything you think is scandalous or anything you didn't understand there? And we're just going to talk about it. And they may kind of, even against their best preparation to be guarded against what you're doing, they're like, well, that's an interesting thought. And so they kind of, let themselves be intellectuals without the exchange for a few minutes. And then you're just hoping that wears down and they, can, right? Because again, I think that sense of friendship is not, and this is one that they love to talk about, so I'll recommend Cicero's De Amicitia again to you, and whatever, if you can work it into your curriculum, that friendship doesn't arise from need. Like, I'm not doing this to get something from you. If so, this isn't friendship, right? And that's not our natural relation to each other, right? We are in, there's nothing more useful than a friend. But the friendship is this selfless affirmation of this other thing. So they do kind of fall for it, I guess is what I'm saying. But it is an always struggle, right? Kind of recalibrating. And so you got to play the game too. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So I do, with my seniors, I do it every other Friday. And with my freshmen, it's probably every third Friday. And some schools, that's all they do. That's the main mode for, a literature class or a history class. So that you kind of, depends on where you are and what your other responsibilities are to the curriculum and the administration. But there are schools that just do seminar. This is not one of them, but yeah. So I do it as a kind of festive punctuation. Yeah.
That is it for this week, folks. Thank you so much for listening. And our thanks to Mr. Hatch for his just teaching wizardry in the mode of seminar and all the other modes, to step into his classroom as a teacher, to be taught by a great teacher and his great teaching friend, Mr. Tom Steenson. Do check out the details on heightsforum.org about the teaching workshop, June the 16th through the 20th, 2025. If you'd like to hear even more from Mr. Hatch before then, do consider listening to the Heights Forum Faculty Podcast, the most recent episode dealing with textbooks. I found it very, very interesting personally as a teacher. Hoping to see Heights parents and their friends at the Tell the Next Generation conference coming up April the 12th. Learn more about that at heights.edu. Register there, invite a friend. All are very, very welcome. Finally, none of the things that I've just described possible without the incredible team that makes all this stuff happen. To Con, George, Mary, Nate, and the entire Heights faculty, we thank you all. And thanks to you for making this possible, for keeping our doors open here in Potomac, Maryland, and allowing us to share our mission throughout the United States, throughout the world. We're very, very grateful. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.